Same shit, different day. That's what he said to me. Same shit, different day. We both chuckled. It was one of those ordinary conversations that happen every day. I asked how things were going, and he gave me the sort of answer most of us have heard before. We laughed, said our goodbyes, and went our separate ways. But I've been thinking about that little exchange ever since. Maybe because tomorrow's June 1st. I'm sitting here on the last afternoon of May enjoying a cigar, watching the day slowly wind down. The garden's growing and the trees are full. The world feels very different than it did a few months ago. And yet, for many people, tomorrow's simply another day, another page on the calendar, another month. May becomes June. Same thing, different day. The ancients would have found that a strange way to think, not because they were wiser than we are, and not because they were more spiritual than we are, but because their lives depended on understanding something that many of us no longer have to think about. They understood that seasons mattered. Seasons mattered not as scenery, not as poetry, not as something to admire from a window, but seasons were instructions. They told you what work belonged in this moment. Tomorrow, when June arrives, an ancient farmer would not simply see another month. He would see a change in assignment, a change in focus, a change in responsibility. You see, spring had largely been a season of preparation and planting. Fields were cleared, ground was worked, the seeds were selected and planted, and the future was placed into the soil. But by June, much of what worked was finished. The seed was already in the ground, and that changed everything. The questions were no longer about what to plant. The questions became about what had already been planted and what needed water, what needed protection, what would need support, what would I have to pay attention to. And the work shifted from beginning to developing, from starting to tending. And that shift really matters. It mattered because the ancient farmer understood something that's easy for all of us to forget. June was never really about June. June was about the harvest. And the harvest was never really about the harvest. The harvest was about surviving winter. You see, every season serves another season. Spring planting leads to summer tending. Summer tending leads to autumn harvest. And autumn harvest will lead to winter survival. They're all connected. Neglect one, and eventually all the others suffer. So, a farmer who failed to tend his crops in June wasn't simply making a mistake in June. He was creating a problem for October and maybe starvation for January. So, the work of June for them was preparing for the future. That's why he paid attention, and that's why his focus changed. That's why June wasn't simply May with a different number attached to it. The season had changed, and the responsibility and work changed with it. I've always appreciated that way of thinking. As a gardener, I've learned that gardening doesn't care what month it is on the calendar. The garden responds to seasons, and the season determines the work. So there are times to prepare, there's times to plant, times to tend, times to harvest, and times to rest. And each season asks something different from us. So tomorrow, as I've said, is June. And perhaps the old farmers still have something to teach us, not about agriculture, but about attention, about understanding that the future is often shaped by the work we do in the present season, about recognizing that many seasons are not meant for new beginnings. Some seasons are meant for helping what already exists become everything it can become. And that's the work of June. And if the ancients were right, it's important work because the harvest comes later, or the harvest that comes later will depend in part on what we choose and tend today.